Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Sabre Report podcast. My name is Jonah, and I'm not alone today, but JP, Christian, they're not with me. I'm instead joined by a very special guest. He is the home color analyst, he's the away play-by-play commentator, and he's a multimedia journalist for the Rochester Americans. None other than Andrew Mossbrooks. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Jonah. I feel bad that your co-hosts were not able to be here. I know you said very special guest. I wouldn't define myself as that, but I am a guest and I am excited to be here with you.
Well, I didn't tell you this before we kick things off, but we've been doing this show for about 2 years now, and it's mainly the three of us, and then every so often we have our buddy Jesse on, and then we have our good friend Ryan on sometimes. He does like more of a Bills adjacent show. But those are friendships that have gone back years, and I don't consider those guests. So you are technically our first ever real guest.
Wow.
It's a big honor. Well, at least maybe it's a big honor. I don't know. Some people might not think so.
You can tell in my background I have plenty of wall space, so I can put a banner up somewhere for that.
Yeah, I'll send over a plaque, and I won't forget you when we get famous. But thank you so much for joining me. The people that have been listening to the Sabre Report podcast. I teased sort of at the last episode that we would have something bigger Amerks related heading into this season. JP, Christian, and I, we really like to talk about the Amerks when we can, but obviously we're so laser focused on the Sabres for the 8 months of the year that they're playing. So I really wanted to have the chance to talk to someone with great insight into the team. And who else than someone who's there for every single game each and every season. So the people at home have probably heard your voice, but maybe haven't been able to put a face to the voice at all. So, Andrew, why don't you give a little bit of a background into yourself and go into how you even ended up as the part-time voice of the Amerks as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think I fall in the population of probably I fall in the 99% of people that really like hockey but are nowhere near talented enough to get paid to play. In fact, I'm one of the many that's still paying to play in beer leagues and whatnot. But when I was younger, I fell in love with the game actually because I was grounded. So my mom took my Xbox. I had bad grades in school at the time. Took my Xbox away. I couldn't really do anything. The only thing I had was cable TV. I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends. No allowance for doing the chores, whatever. And I was in middle school and I stumbled on literally by accident through channel surfing a Philadelphia Flyers and Tampa Bay Lightning game. I still remember it was the first game Matt Carl had been acquired actually by Tampa to Philadelphia. And growing up in Pennsylvania with diehard Philly sports fans as family, that was sort of what got me the bug through hockey. And I remember messing around in the locker room once, kind of fast forwarding here, once I started playing, and I obviously not finding the game until middle school. I was kind of a late bloomer with playing as well. And I would mess around in the locker room and jokingly try to be like Pierre Maguire or Doc Emmerich. And I just remember one of my friends being like, your voice doesn't sound that bad. You're pretty good at this. And then I went to college with the intentions of playing for the club team that for the school I was attending. Did not make the team, got cut in training camp. Thought it was the biggest mistake. Why'd I go to this school? My mom, when I called her, was like, dude, you're not going to get paid to play. You're not dropping out of school because you didn't make a club team. And that team ended up actually needing a play-by-play broadcaster my freshman year. So they reached back out, asked if I wanted to do this. I did. And utilized that for an internship sort of my senior year. Graduated, jumped around a little bit. I've been in a couple of different leagues. I've lived in, I think, 4 states in the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years. And in terms of getting to Rochester, it just so happened that the last stop prior to this was with the Cincinnati Cyclones in the ECHL, who at the time were affiliated with the Amerks and Sabres. And as that affiliation was coming to an end in 2023, I had reached out. I had already made really great connections with the awesome staff that we have in Rochester. And I basically said, if there's an opportunity to get there, I don't know what this working relationship looks like moving forward because They were partnering with Jacksonville, but I want to find a way to be a part of this. And fortunately, something opened up that summer, and we had a few conversations, and ultimately that led me to being an Amerk.
I can relate to that personally. I guess I probably never talked about it on here, but I similarly went into college to pursue something different. I thought I was going to be an accountant, and that just ended up not being for me. And just kind of along the way, realized like I'm passionate about hockey in a really big way. So why not just talk about it and talk about it with people that are similarly passionate? So I relate.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because in high school I wanted to be an accountant as well, and I thought I was going to go to college for that until my senior year. And I don't even know that it made sense that it was like good reasoning, but like my first job was at McDonald's, so I would go into the banks and cash my check for $150 every 2 weeks, and I remember looking at them and they all seemed very miserable. So I was just like, yeah, I don't think I even want to be in like business at all, which I don't know that Teller and the bit like I don't even know that it really correlated, but it did enough in my brain, as smart as I actually am, to be like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I was the first person to leave at my high school graduation party at my party because I told my parents and my family I was like I'm not going to go to college, at least to start, and I didn't. I took a year off after school, and it was in that year off like I'm trying to give the cliff notes so we don't end up with your this
Oh
podcast.
no, please do.
But it was during that year off that like even though I had been watching hockey for years to that point, I turned on a game and it just clicked for me where I was like, man, these guys are talking about hockey. Uh, they're getting paid to talk about hockey and they're getting paid to watch hockey. Like this is awesome. Like this is a great career path. And I certainly didn't know then what I know now in terms of how challenging of a career path it is and the sacrifices and what you need to do to get to wherever it is that you want to get to. But through all of that, like I'm 30 years old. I'd like to think I'm still on the side of youth, we'll call it. But if you look at an NHL roster,
You're one
um,
foot in the grave if you look at it like an NHLer.
it's crazy, man. Like I'm finally at the age where I'm looking, even with Rochester, I'm looking at our training camp roster, and I'm like, is there one or two guys older than me? Like I actually don't even know if there are anymore. But like that, just again, the experiences that you get to do, and the opportunities for people like yourself to do podcasts like this, for me to get to call games, and write stories and tell stories about these players. It's such an awesome job and it's such a fun thing to do. So everything that happened between two guys, look at this. There's two guys that were talking about being accountants, and here we are on a podcast together talking about hockey.
I think we made the right choice in the end.
I agree.
So we're about a week away from, or at least the day we're recording this, we're about a week away from the Amerks kicking things off. Their first game is on October 10th. Before we get into them and before we start talking about them, what does this time of year look like for you personally as someone who's there for every game?
Oh, it's crazy, and it is for everybody. It's kind of it's a mix of like, at least to me, like love hate because you're so excited, but the hours are a lot longer. The sun is starting to set a little earlier out here in Rochester. We've actually been blessed with like awesome weather this weekend, coming up here, but you just like you can feel it, and like summer being over is like, you're gonna miss it, but and with the hours being longer at the office, like we in the minor leagues, it's considerably smaller staffs, and so everybody's wearing more hats than they typically would, and that's not to diminish the amount of work that our friends at the Buffalo Sabres are doing right now as well to get ready. But it's in the case of myself, just before I was talking with you here, I was kind of looking at my broadcast notes and like you're going over things again, and you're also remembering that because you have, I don't know if significant is the right word, but you have some roster movement, which is part of the course, especially in the AHL. So you're getting to know new names, new faces. You're getting to understand their backstory. I'm very fortunate that I get to work and help with our creative side as well. So, um, I don't know that that's something that, yeah, I don't think that's like falls under my title, but my title is so long right now that it's just, I don't want to keep adding words to it. But it's like you're helping with execution of doing shots for what our intro video is going to look like on the video board. You're storyboarding content ideas that you're going to do from a digital side this season. You're starting to accumulate interviews that you can do, whether it be with alumni or active players. You're writing stories about those players. Again, you're doing the broadcast prep. Like it's a lot of moving pieces. Hell, scheduling community events and appearances for players for the moves. I don't do so much of that, but I'm often present at those. So, I'm looking at my calendar and making sure, okay, I know we have that Wednesday and Friday game, but we have this Tuesday appearance as well. I need to remember to be there. So it's a lot of moving pieces that get you to the dance. The dance being that opening game, October 10th against the Toronto Marlies, and then from there it kind of feels like it's a bit of gravy. Like the hours are still going to be long, but you're like, okay, I'm reestablishing my rhythm that is hockey season.
I've felt that the last few weeks were busy for myself and my co-host, and then just to hear all that, it puts it in perspective, and it's impressive how much you are able to handle, and it's very admirable, and like you said, awesome job to have.
Thank you.
As for the team themselves, last season was, by all accounts, another great year for the Amerks. And I think heading into it, given that, you expect, Yuri Kulik, for example, made the Buffalo Sabres out of camp. He came back for a little bit, but then was up full time. And you couple that into the whole, just looking at it from a wider scale, I don't think people expected them to have as good of a season as they did. And I think heading into this year, it's important to highlight just how good they were. 45-22, 5-3, a 92-point season, their best since 2018-19. Second in the North Division, losing to the team in the playoffs that finished first. They were fourth overall in the AHL standings. It was a great season, and I'm sure you could elaborate more on just how great it was to be a part of that, and kind of your take on how it all unfolded.
Yeah, Jonah, I think the biggest thing you hit on was I think we expected to make the playoffs again. I don't know that there was a belief that we would be better than what we were the year prior. Of course, Michael Leone, which I know we'll jump in with later on, but we had a first-year head coach in professional hockey. We had a very, very young roster on the blue line in particular. We're not sure if Devon Levi was going to be with Rochester or how much he was going to be with Rochester. And the Amerks, who kind of, I feel, completed this transition this past offseason, but going into last year, pieces to their core were gone, which at the time would have been their captain, Michael Mersch. Brandon Byro was a heavy presence on the power play. And as you talked about, Yuri Kulik was a player the Amerks saw for all of 4 regular season games last season. He did what the Rochester Americans and the Buffalo Sabres set out to do, use his AHL time to develop him so that way he can graduate. And he did, and boy, did he flourish at KeyBank Center and everywhere that the Sabres were on the road. To see the team play as well as they did, it was remarkable. And to see the buy-in for what they had with Michael Leone, I don't know. Like it was, and by the way, they started out 1-3, which isn't a big deal in a 72 game season. But I think when we saw that, we're like, okay, this isn't the most surprising thing in the world. But Leo would tell you this too. If you use a good hockey eye and you watch back those 4 games, those 3 losses, like the Amerks were the better team in all 4 of those games. One of which they won. The other 3, it was just, a bad bounce here, a bad bounce there. Younger players learning and adjusting, the Nikita Novikovs, Vsevolod Komarovs, Victor Neuchev when he was healthy at the start of the year. Riley Fiddler-Schultz, and there's so many stories. Konsta Helenius, of course, he was probably the story going into last season in Rochester. And to see everybody galvanize around the group um, the idea of making each other better. It worked, and it was in such harmony that they found their stride and they were clicking all year. But I do think a big difference between last season and this, and we've talked about it even as a staff. Like you asked about what this time of year looks like. To be honest, it's very different than what last year looked like because with the Sabres being in the global series, I don't know that that gets talked about enough, but it certainly did in our walls in Rochester. There were essentially there was the Buffalo Sabres who were in Czechia, and there were the Rochester Sabres or Buffalo Americans playing in North America. And so you had an AHL team traveling to Pittsburgh and Ottawa and Columbus, in some cases playing like damn near a complete NHL roster. And like that was such beneficial experience for those players that by the time the regular season came for the AHL, they were playing teams that played one, maybe two preseason games. The Amerks had 5, 6, 7 in the back of their pocket. So that really helped jumpstart what, as you pointed out, ended up being just a terrific season on the ice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because everybody, even this training camp, even some of the Sabres players have talked about how it's nice that this year's normal. Last year was, a different experience, but for the Amerks, especially with the new head coach staying in North America, they had a great preseason last year. I think they went 6-1. I still remember that game against Ottawa that they totally outskated. They ended up winning in overtime, but it arguably should have been done already. They totally outplayed Ottawa, and then Noah Ostlund went on to score the overtime winner. I think that's a really underrated part of probably why they found success eventually, and even despite the 1-3 start, they looked so good out of the gate.
Yeah, I 100%. And I remember that Ottawa game. We were there too, and I think that's the uniqueness again as a staff. Like we were with the team for those road games. And I will tell you, it's quite the difference going from a coach bus to a charter flight. It made it a little more difficult to take that first road trip in the AHL last season. But we had a jumpstart that so many teams were not afforded. And from there, just things were clicking, and it always felt like if one thing wasn't working, another was. So on a night that and it doesn't happen often, but on a night that maybe Devon Levi didn't have his best game, or at the time, Felix Sandstrom, Michael Hauser, our other goaltenders, if they weren't as sharp, the offense was putting 5, 6, 7 in the back of the net. So you were outscoring your problems. And then on a night where maybe the power play isn't clicking and the offense is really struggling, Devon Levi did what he did best, and that's why he was an all-star in the AHL last year, or the defense would be blocking a ton of shots in front of him, and the Amerks could claw out a 2-1, 3-2 win. There was always something or somebody or some group that were willing to step up last season. And I know, look, ultimately it didn't end in the way that the team wanted it to, with that Game 5 loss to Laval in the division finals. But man, this team still sits there, and there is that what if. Like, what if they would have won Game 5? What if we would have flew down to Charlotte? And I know Charlotte now, they had their way with Laval, but the way parity, I was talking with Jason Karmanos, the Amerks general manager, about this recently. Like the parity in the AHL, it's not linear. You can't sit there and say, okay, Laval got swept by Charlotte, and we lost to Laval, so we would have got killed by Charlotte. You don't know that. Like teams match up differently against one another. Cleveland was a playoff team last year, and the Amerks had easier games against Cleveland than every other team in the North Division. Like they beat them all but one time out of 8 games last season. But Syracuse would then beat Rochester, and then Syracuse would lose to Cleveland. And they'd be like, we can't beat them. And the Amerks, honestly, they kind of handedly took those games against the Monsters. So, long story long there, just there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of what ifs. And I think there's a large group returning this year to try and see if they can finish that story and answer that question.
Well, you brought up his name multiple times, and, the story about the Amerks last season, like you said, a big part of it was going to be the rookies. Anybody from Konsta Helenius or Vsevolod Komarov. But one other rookie was the coach himself, Michael Leone. Last season, it was a big question because he was filling the shoes of Seth Appert, who had a very successful few seasons with them before getting called up to Buffalo. And, not only did he come in and keep Rochester a playoff competitor, but like I said, he coached them to their best regular season since 2018-19 with a roster that I don't think people saw that coming. How was he able to do that? What does he do that gets this group going?
It's a great question. And the best thing I can do is guess that answer for you. Which is that I think people know he silently believes in them. And you mentioned Seth Appert, like having worked with both of these coaches, people were quick to point out, oh, both have a background in the U.S. National Development Program. Both were younger. Both were USHL, right? Junior hockey into pro. Personality-wise, I don't think they could be more different. I think Seth, who we miss and are super happy for his success in Buffalo, but Seth was a little bit more of an extrovert. And Michael is more introverted. He's a little more quiet. He's a little more reserved. And I think both were able to get the most out of the Amerks in different ways. And kind of goes back to, I talk about parity and I say how there's nothing linear. Like in the game of hockey, there is nothing linear. So I think what Michael Leone did was he was quiet, but candid. So willing in the time, when the time required it, to have those conversations with players, even if they were difficult conversations, to get more out of them. I think the other thing that Leo enjoyed doing is he gave immediate trust to this team. And immediately in doing so, I think it created this instillment of self-accountability for every one of those players that were in that locker room, where they understood the assignment. And if they failed to meet that assignment, they knew they were going to have to answer to that. I don't think Leo had a big rah-rah speech about it. Like, I think he just kind of went about his way. I think he goes about his way. He has a great relationship with both assistant coaches Nathan Page and Vinny Prospel, to where it also kind of, at least to me being around the team, it felt like each assistant coach kind of had a full autonomy to really lead in their own way as well. Like Leo trusted that Pacher was going to work with the defensemen, that those were his projects. Trusted Vinny with offense and with power play and with Pacher penalty kill. And I remember so many times Konsta, who we brought up, Konsta Helenius. I remember so many times seeing Vinny and Konsta having conversations off to the side. And I think that was Leo saying, I know my assistant coaches. They have incredible pedigree. I'm young. I know how to lead. I know how to coach. But I know part of coaching comes through trust. And I trust my coaches, and I trust these players. And I just think it immediately instilled this kind of calm demeanor in the dressing room. He's not the kind of guy that's going to go in there and break sticks and, throw a Gatorade jug across the room. Even in losses, even in games where, like, I remember being in Charlotte, we lost 6-0 the first night. And, I'm going to mess this up. My memory is, for some reason, challenging me right now. I know we lost 6-0. I want to say we had a very bad night on the penalty kill. The very next day, it was less than 24 hours later, we won 3-0 against Charlotte. Like, he's not flipping out. Nobody's losing their job. Nobody's getting cut. It's just calming. And I think that was the main thing about Michael Leone, is calming presence, trust, instillment of accountability, that led to that team being as successful as they did. And as a result, and that success, Jonah, came simultaneously with so many of those young players taking a step forward, to where by the end of their seasons, they were significant, in almost every case, significantly better than where they were at the start of their year.
So one of the things that he was challenged with last year was, like you said, bringing up how, I brought up how Yuri Kulik didn't start the year there and was there for a quick cup of coffee before staying with Buffalo. And then on top of that, Brandon Biro was gone. and his name's escaping me. Who was the other guy? Michael Mersch, the
Michael Murph.
captain. Michael Mersch had left, so guys had to come in and fill those roles. And Mason Jobs, who was their captain this year, Brett Murray, those were the guys that sort of slotted in. But those are two players that are gone. On top of that, Lucas Rusek, who's been a part of the organization for a while now, and then even Cal Clegg, who led the team in playoff scoring and was one of their better players all season, and even Ethan Prow, who's been in the organization for a little bit. All of those guys have departed. Who is going to step into those roles?
I've said so much so that I put it in a story on Amerks.com when talking with Jason Carmanos. We recently wrote a feature, and he didn't tip his hand. Neither has Leo thus far, but they've talked about the kind of qualities they look for in a player. And so much of being a captain in the AHL is like, I think point production comes second. That's not to say that you don't want to produce when you're wearing a letter, but so much of it is like you're responsible for helping the people around you grow and develop. And especially those guys that, fall under the label of Buffalo Sabres prospect. Like that's something I remember talking with Michael Mersch following his retirement, that, one of his greatest joys toward the end was seeing the Kuliks and the Roseians of the world get call-ups and Jack Quinn and, being around for players like that. So I think to me, I see it as, this is an opinion. I'm fairly confident this is going to happen, but I have no insider information. I think it's either going to be Josh Dunn or Zach Metsa as the captain. My reasoning for it is they've both been captains at the collegiate level. They have both wore letters in the American Hockey League. They're both talented players who can produce, but they both have the ability to lead. And you look at what Josh Dunn did 2 years ago. He was one of the point-producing leaders. I think, actually, believe he did lead Cleveland in playoff scoring in 2024. And they went to Game 7 against Hershey after being down 3-0 in a best-of-7 conference finals. Like, guys like that are able to pull on a rope and almost get there from, like, being on the brink of elimination, that's a heck of a quality you want to have in a guy that's in your dressing room. And then Zach Metsa won it being a leader for Quinnipiac University, winning a national championship. And he's also been in the organization for a couple of years. He and Dunn are different players. Obviously, one's a defenseman, one's a forward. Different backgrounds, but similar at the same time. I think one of those guys finds a C. Safe to say, I would assume. Now, at the time we're recording this, Josh Dunn is still with the Buffalo Sabres, so I don't know if he's there when they trim the roster. I guess you're probably leaning toward Metsa getting the captaincy, but I still think Dunn gets a letter. I would not be surprised if some of the players for the Amerks that have been here for a while, I think of Brendan Warren immediately. He now, with Brett Murray's departure, is the longest tenured active Rochester American. He's going into his 6th season with the organization, signed a 2-year deal in the offseason, so you would hope he's bound for year 7 as well, come when we're talking about this 12 months from now. I think he could get a letter. I wouldn't be surprised if one of these more experienced but new pieces find their way into a leadership role. So I think of a Zach Jones on defense, or a Tanner Lecision up front. We'll see where Carson Meyer is. But guys like that, I feel, have a shot at being alternates. But if we're looking at the C, I think it's going to either be Josh Dunn or Zach Metsa.
The Metsa thing doesn't surprise me. Every time I feel like I tap into the Amerks community, people just rave about this kid and want to see him even get a shot, get an NHL contract with the Sabres. So I think that would make a lot of people happy.
You said the Amerks community, and that's another point that I should have mentioned there. We're talking about how important a captain is off the ice in the AHL. And it's not just with developing players, and Metsa is a great example of this. Like, you need to be an ambassador for the community. He's back-to-back years sometimes he's called Zachary Metsa, sometimes Zach Metsa. He told me this year we're going just Zach. but he's been nominated for the Yannick Dupree award, which annually is handed out to the AHL's most outstanding player in the community. Back-to-back years, he's been our team's nominee because of everything that he does to be involved in community initiatives, whether that is hospital visits, reading to kids. We have a reading power play program we've been doing for 2 decades now, where we go to local libraries and in the midst of a season multiple times, and read to the youth in the greater Rochester area. And so I know you use the word community. I'd just be remiss if I didn't mention that. Like, that's another just key aspect, because if a leader is doing that, that's some of the things that you're telling the youth here. Like, hey, if you're going to be an Amerks, you're going to live the Rochester American way, and it's not just on ice performance.
Metsa came into the organization, as a pretty young guy, and you just said how he'll be able to message to the younger guys that this is what it takes if you want to be a leader. Which of the Amerks of those young guys do you think kind of exudes that sort of energy that Metsa has? Like, who could be the next Zach Metsa, if there even is one, do you think?
It's a great question. I don't know. It's hard to say because it's different kind of energy. Like, I think one thing that I know I've name dropped him a ton of times. I don't just Jason Carmanos has said, and I think Kevin Adams has mentioned this as well, that the objective is always getting the right people before getting the right player. And that's a real thing. Like, culture is kind of a buzzword that gets used now. But there's like validity to it, in terms of getting the right kind of human beings, the positive energy people, that are coming into the locker room, that are helping add, and helping grow and foster that youthful exuberance and excitement, and just happiness. You get to do something you love. I don't know if there is somebody like Zach Metsa, but I can tell you that, like, Brendan Warren is a guy who is loud and energetic until you put a mic in front of him, and then he doesn't want to talk. But Graham Slaggert is one of our basically social media butterflies. If we're making a content piece, he's right there and ready to help in any way he can. And then when you're looking at on ice, I know he's young. Konsta Helenius, like, look what he did in the playoffs last year. There were moments where he's like, I got this. And toward the second half of the season, where he looked like he was able to just kind of have moments where he could carry a team, where he could be the best player on the ice, even though he was a teenager at the time. So yeah, I don't know if that directly answers your question. It's kind of a scoot around, but there's a lot of really good people in that Rochester Americans dressing room.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to sort of evaluate that, because at the end of the day, we are sort of more on the outside. It's the people in the locker room and in the inner workings of the organization that can best judge that. So I understand that. Onto the team as well. We can start with the guy that you were just talking about, and that's Konsta Helenius, who is coming off of what we've talked about as just a very, very impressive preseason. He talks about at the start of training camp about how difficult it was to play in Rochester last year at just the age of 18. Here we are, 19 years old, and I remember when he was drafted, reading up on what a lot of people had to say, and just from what I'd watched, and I thought that, yeah, he was going to be closer to the NHL than I think a lot of people initially thought. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that now as well. I'm trying to structure this because I'm sure you really do pump the tires of him as well. How did you see his game mature from start to finish last year?
Yeah, I think you almost can't compare Konsta Helenius's first half of his rookie season to the second half. It looked like two different players. And I think what people need to remember is he was such a storyline last year, as any first round. It's the same thing this year with Radi Murka, where everybody's talking about him. These are teenagers. Not everybody is Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews. They take time. that doesn't mean that Konsta is 3 years away. And I think to your point, there could be some arguments that depending on how the dominoes fall in Buffalo, you could see him get a rookie lap this season. That's going to be dictated by, again, just whatever happens with the Sabres, but probably more importantly, what Konsta Helenius brings to the table. He struggled adjusting to the smaller ice at the start of last season, which I feel like always gets talked about ad nauseum with any European players. But here's the thing. Konsta isn't like this 6'5", 220-pound just beast of a visual beast of a man. But man, this guy's got strength. And he can play tough. And I think that's a misconception where a lot of European players, the knock on them is that they don't know how to play that way. Because you're not used to close proximity hockey. It's a wider sheet of ice. There's more creativity. You're able to avoid checks more. Konsta wanted to be in it from day one. And he was targeted by a lot of other teams. If he was near the net after the whistle, he was getting jabbed at. If he was near the boards and he plays the puck up, somebody's coming in to finish their check on him. Like, people knew who Konsta Helenius was. The other team had scouted that out. And I think in some ways, maybe that was daunting at first. But once Konsta started feeling comfortable, it changed. And he went over and played for Finland in World Juniors. I think coming out of that, it still took just a little bit of time. But he turned it on. I think he was confident. I think he was dynamic with the puck, like the highlights we saw when he got drafted by the Sabres. He found a way to bring the creativity from the wider sheet of ice over here because of his hands, because he was able to move his hands quicker and pick the right angles and pick the right spots on the smaller ice as he started playing more. And he started to engage in the physical aspect of the game. And it's not to say that he was ever shy of it, but maybe there was this belief of, I don't want to do it, like I will if I have to. And then he became the guy that wanted to do it. And as a result of being physically engaged, that led to offense. To the point where I think in the playoffs, you could very well argue Konsta Helenius was the best forward on the Rochester Americans. And I think in talking with people around the organization, there is a big expectation for this coming season. Is that him in the NHL? I don't know. I think that's a lot to put on a player at his age. But should Konsta Helenius be north of 20 goals this season in Rochester? I think that's a fair ask. Should Konsta Helenius be top 5 in scoring on Rochester? I think that's probably a fair ask too. And if those results come and Konsta can be one of those on-ice leaders, that is the next step in his development, Jonah, in my opinion. And I think that is extremely within reach based on what we saw from him out of training camp with Buffalo and the first couple of days here in Roch.
You talked about how it was a tale of two seasons for him. Another player that I think that applies to is another rookie, and that was Noah Ostlund. 1 point in his first 12 games. He scored 35 in his last 33. What was the tale of his 2 seasons? How was he so much better in the second half as opposed to, I guess, a slowish start?
Well, so, it is a good point. It's an accurate point. Where Ostlund and Helenius differ is Noah Ostlund was hurt and missed about 2 months of the season at the start of the year. So that was like really disappointing for Rochester. And this is around the time too where you realize Yuri Kulik isn't going to be here. So 2 big pieces out. And Noah Ostlund just kind of fit like a glove where he needed to be. I think a big thing that helped him is in December when he came back, once he was healthy. I can't remember if this was the beginning of the month or the middle of the month, but he got put on a line with Brett Murray and Isak Rosen. So you've got a fellow Swede in Rosen who had an incredible year, led Rochester in scoring. I think finished with north of 25 goals. He had Brett Murray, who, again, was right up there with Rosen, been a veteran, been around for 6 years with the organization. And if you're Noah Ostlund, those are just 2 players that open you up. And Ostlund was able to create so much offense by feeding pucks to them. What happens in that in that period then is another team scouting report is saying, okay, he's going to look for 18, Rosen. He's going to look for 81, Murray. So now teams are ready for that, and they're starting to drag their defense toward those guys on the wing. Now you flip the script, and Ostlund's getting the puck fed to him. And there was just this dynamic. On top of it, Noah Ostlund was great on the power play as well. I think his speed was advantageous, as it will be for any hockey player. His reads, like his hockey IQ of knowing where to be, just seemed so far ahead of his years. And we were talking right now about Konsta potentially going to the NHL. Like, look, we wanted Noah Ostlund to develop. Everybody wants that, of course. But if you would have told me that Noah Ostlund would have went from missing basically the first 2 months of the season to finishing his season with the Buffalo Sabres, like that would have been a heck of a bet to cash in on. I think it would have surprised a lot of people, but he just worked. And I think his hands, his vision, his IQ, he's wise beyond his years. And he is another one right up there with Konsta Helenius that if you're looking for the Sabres and you're looking on offense, like those two guys they are in the conversation. You hope, obviously, for Buffalo to have a healthy year, to have a year where they can, get back into the playoffs. But if somebody goes down, and I hate saying it, it's an 82-game season, just like in the AHL, it's a 72-game season. Injuries kind of feel inevitable at this point in professional sports. Like those are two of the top guys that could get their number called to go up and get a call up.
Yeah, Ostlund, to see him have that success the second half was so just gratifying because, he's coming into his rookie season, coming out of the Allsvenskan. You don't know how that's going to translate right away, especially he's a few years removed from his draft. And, yeah, to get rewarded, very deservedly so, to finish the year with the Sabres and then impress there, I think, that was very gratifying for a lot of fans. He was also a guy that when he was drafted, you knew one of the things he was going to have to work on was his physical outlook. Yeah, I think he was 160 when he was drafted, and then going into training camp last year, I think he was 170. He's 180 pounds coming into this training camp. Do you think that helps him unlock another level, or do you think it just was never about that and it was just about getting more acclimated to the North American ice?
Well, it certainly has to be a factor, right? And we've heard that story. It's a tale as old as time about undersized players trying to play in the National Hockey League. And I think that was certainly I guess a slight on Ostlund, but he made it work last year at the frame he had then. So yes, I think to your point, he understood that. I think most of these guys do. Again, a reminder, kind of like Helenius, not quite as young, but they are still very much in that like kids age range. And so working on his frame, getting that muscle, which is going to result in being stronger on the puck, harder to get off the puck. If you can incorporate that and infuse it with the already established speed and the playmaking abilities that Ostlund has, the 200-foot game that he presents down the middle as a center, and I'd like to think that's where he would find himself in the NHL as well when he is ready to be there full time. I think he is best down the middle, opposed to a wing. I think without question that addition of muscle and putting on a little bit of weight will be an asset for him, and hopefully we get to see it on full display soon.
Your comment about him playing center is interesting because it was something we saw with Yuri Kulik, how anytime it felt like he was projected onto the Sabres roster by fans, like he was most likely getting placed on the wing. And I think a lot of people were skeptical he was going to be able to translate to center. And now he's a potential, he finished last season on the first line with Tage Thompson. And there seems to be that similar, like maybe fans see Noah Ostlund as a winger in the NHL, but it's sort of the same thing with, like Vinny Prospel talking about him. Do you think it's similar where like this organization truly feels like he can exceed or succeed at center in the NHL?
I think so. And I think if to that point, that's where that muscle is like so pivotal when you're battling on faceoffs, right? And I think that is something that probably became and maybe is almost a bit of a non-negotiable, because you do need to be ready to be in that dot for some really key game situations. I think the face-off, and this might sound silly, but like I think the art of the face-off is something not enough people understand. Especially Noah Ostlund and the ability to play in all situations, because, like most, because if he gets called up to the NHL and he's playing center, he's going to I mean, I could be wrong. He's probably going to start as a bottom six. He's potentially going to get put out on the PK. Think about how big a faceoff is when you win it on the PK versus losing it and the other team is immediately set up on the power play. Think of the opposite of that when you're on the power play and you get to set up. Think of the defensive zone faceoff in a 1-goal game with the net pulled and there's 6 seconds left. Those moments are massive. And you need somebody who's ready to be in those moments. I think Noah Ostlund showed his ability to be clutch. There were a couple of games in Utica. There was 1 week, it was back-to-back weeks. 1 week, the Amerks scored late to tie it. He scored the overtime winner. The next week, it was literally 7 days later, the Amerks were down by 1 with 3 minutes to go, and he scored to tie it. They would go on to lose in a shootout, but those are the situations that you need him out there for: winning the faceoff, getting set up, and getting the shot off, or making the pass. One of those games against Utica as well, he passed it to Isak Rosen for a one-timer, and that was a game-tying goal in the moment. So his mass is going to matter. His play will continue to develop, at least I would anticipate it does. And I do believe that in the right situation, under the right circumstances, he can be a viable center for the Buffalo Sabres.
So jumping over to another player, and I think this is one that a lot of people are starting to wonder about a little bit, and that's Isak Rosen. The Sabres obviously took 13th/14th overall back in 2021. And after, there's no other way to put it, some very, very good seasons with the Amerks. And last year, it felt like he was in the conversation for the AHL MVP race for a little bit. After this training camp, there's been some, there's just people wondering about what his next steps are, since he's not going to start the season in Buffalo. I think I want your perspective on. I think there's a lot of people that underrate just how good he is in Rochester, and I think you can speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, he's been one of the best Amerks 2 years in a row, and had a heck of a year the year before that when they went to the conference finals. It is a big year for Isak Rosen, and I don't think that is I don't think that's breaking news. He's in a contract year, and a big decision would be looming, I presume, next summer, and that is going to be the direction in which that decision is going to be made. Is probably going to be based off of this season's performance. Isak Rosen has proven he can dominate the AHL level. He's a 2-time All-Star, back-to-back years. He is a player that can produce at near a point per game pace in the American Hockey League. I think there were several stretches, if not all, basically all season last year, where Isak Rosen looked like he didn't belong here. I think you saw that with Jiri Kulich at times too, where it just looked like it was boys against men. And Kulich got rewarded for that. Now, I will say, I think one thing that Rosen benefited from last year, and we've talked about this a little bit even with him, is in Rochester for the last couple of years, he and Jiri Kulich were sort of always like you couldn't say one name without the other in the same sentence, and they were this dynamic duo. But it was Rosen constantly feeding Kulich for what we've seen in the NHL is just an unbelievable one-timer. He's got a hell of a shot. Him not being here in some ways allowed Rosen to kind of peel another layer back to his game. And Isak Rosen started being the one with one-timers on the power play. And he started shooting the puck more. And that's something he talked about, because he basically said, how could I when I have Jiri Kulich on my line? I have to feed it to him. It makes all the sense in the world. So I think that gave him more confidence. Now, fast forward to this past summer, and we were at a media scrum for before the Sabres main camp opened for Prospects Challenge, and there was basically this narrative that Michael Leone did not say it, but it was taken and run with, where it was essentially Rosen needs to dominate at Prospects Challenge. And he did not. And then you're hoping for him to, showcase some things in the Sabres preseason games. And there was some room on the table for more to be desired. So he's starting in Rochester, to your point. It's a mindset thing, I think, right? Like, if he has the right mindset, he will produce here, and he will be in that conversation. We've talked about Helenius and Ostlund. This is not a bad problem for the Buffalo Sabres to have, by the way. Like, Cooley got called up. I think Sabres fans thought that was going to happen eventually. They were waiting for it. Then you kind of think, okay, Rosen's next on deck. Now you have Ostlund and Helenius that are in the mix there. Heck, from an older player, we kind of early in our conversation dropped the name Josh Dunn, who brings something very different to the table than what those three prospects do. Like, this is a good problem to have, that you would sit there, and if you're Kevin Adams, you need to call somebody up if you need to, and be like, man, I have options. And sometimes internal competition is good. And I think for Isak Rosen, maybe that gets recognized, where it's like, okay, I'm in no way trying to put words in his mouth, because it's not something he said. It's an observation that, maybe there was this belief of, okay, Yuri's up, I'm next man on deck. And now you start looking around you, and to your left and your right, you got a fellow Swede, and then you got another kid who was playing for Olli Jokinen in the top Finnish league, and now he's putting a heck of a campaign together in Rochester. And it's like, okay, it's not so clear-cut anymore. Does that bring the best out of all of those players individually, knowing that they're playing to win together in Rochester, but in some way there is some internal competition against one another to be that name when the phone rings on the wall? Which definitely does not happen anymore, because nobody has a phone on the wall. My fun little analogy. It's a big year for Isak Rosen, and I think he can perform, but time will tell.
The last player that, right, not even a player, because he's a goaltender. I think the one guy that a lot of people are wondering about, when is it going to be time? And that's Devon Levi, who whenever he's in the AHL has just been a monster. They call him the Beast for a reason, and I think
you're telling me people are talking about Devon Levi coming up to Buffalo now.
Last season was just he was tremendous throughout, and I think the only sort of spot that people maybe pick apart is he didn't have the greatest playoff series against Laval. But even you look at the Syracuse series, he had a .978 save percentage and 2 shutouts. So for him, is there anything else for him to do in the AHL besides dominate? Is there anything that he really needs to shore up, or is it just a matter of waiting when it's just going to be able to translate into the NHL?
So I think this is the last time I'll bring it up. This interview that we did with Jason Karmanos, and there's a written piece on Amerks.com about this. I asked him the same question in different words, and he said, there's nothing left for Devon Levi to prove necessarily. That is not why Devon is with the Rochester Americans. It's not, hey, we need to see this one more thing from you to know. It's to play games. And it's fun answering this kind of question, because you read it online, and something Jason had mentioned is, fans, understandably so, certainly in a city like Buffalo, certainly with what's going on with the Sabres over the last decade plus, little impatient. And it's kind of, you're ready now, and everybody wants everyone to be ready now. And I believe that Devon Levi is a special goaltender who absolutely has the potential to be a long-term goaltender in the NHL for years to come. But right now, you heard it from Jason Karmanos, and actually even earlier this year, I'll go all the way back to development camp, talking with Seamus Kotick, who's the goaltending coach for the Sabres organization. We see him a lot in Rochester. And in that moment, we were talking about everybody. We were talking about Levi, Topias Lainen, Scott Ratzlaff, who were also a part of this pipeline. I think people were turning heads when Alex Georgiev got signed. I think people were raising questions. Fans, Alex Lyon, 2 years. You know, um, and obviously Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who's been dealing with some injury issues. Once again, kind of like how I had just said about, it's not the worst thing in the world to call the Rochester Americans and be like, I don't know who to call up because we have so many talented players. The same goes for goaltending. You cannot be too deep in your crease. There is no such thing. And I don't think there's any of the 32 NHL organizations sitting there going, we're good enough. Like, I don't think the Florida Panthers are thinking that. I think they're looking to add. I think they're looking to grow and develop. Right now, combination of contracts, experience, other factors, at least right now, as we record this at the very beginning of October, Devon Levi is in Rochester because there isn't a situation available where he can play 40 to 50 games in the NHL right now. That doesn't mean that won't change. And we don't know when that will change. That could happen this year. That could happen next year. That could happen the year after that. And obviously, at that point, the year after that, you're talking contract negotiations again. Devon Levi just needs to play. And that was something Seamus Kotick talked a lot about. It's the same thing, Topias Lainen and Scott Ratzlaff. I think there's a good possibility one of those guys is going to go to Jacksonville and play in the ECHL. Why? Because imagine Levi, Lainen, Ratzlaff all in the AHL. It sounds like a triple-headed monster in goal, and that's kind of cool, and we can play into that narrative all we want, but there's 72 games, and that's really hard to split amongst two, much less three goaltenders. You want Scott Ratzlaff to develop and play 13 games, 12 games, 11 games. That doesn't really make sense. He played 50 in Seattle in the Western Hockey League. You should probably be playing a lot more. You might need to send him to Jacksonville. Devon Levi had an opportunity to play in Rochester a lot, sometimes on back-to-back nights, getting that experience and getting him reps. And by the way, he's 23 years old. And that's another key thing. Like, guys he could play for another 15 years. And I think the last point I'll leave, I'm so impassioned by this because I know how much of a hot button
it's the big question. I think he's the one. It's the one guy where, especially with him, the development has been, like, the timeline has been so skewed because he made his debut going on 3 years ago, which is crazy to think about. So, I mean, yeah, it's every year until he makes the jump or, until something happens, like, yeah, it's going to be what people are wondering about. So it's totally understandable.
It's hard not to, and I get it. Listen, like, I want to pretend that I know all the answers. Like, I have been a fan. I grew up a Flyers fan. Like, we had plenty of our moments of like, when the heck is this happening? But I will say, without naming names, anybody can look this up. There are so many NHL players, goaltenders, forwards, defensemen, that were drafted young, and in some cases, based on where organizations were, rushed to the NHL. And when you look at their projections versus their reality of what their careers ended up being, there's some really disappointing stories out there. And I think the Sabres have been doing everything they can to make sure that Devon Levi does not fall in that. Everybody talks about him kind of being, there's a lot of comparisons to Ryan Miller. Okay, Ryan Miller played a couple of years in Rochester too.
He didn't take the starting job, I think, till he was 25. 2005, 2006, I believe he was age 25.
So think about that in perspective. Like, if a prophet came to somebody and every Sabres fan and said, wait a second, if you would have told them, Ryan Miller is going to be here, he is going to be one of the greatest goaltenders of this franchise's history. Obviously, it's hard to argue Hasek, but outside of that, I think it's him. And he's going to help you. You're going to get to the playoffs all these years. You're going to win a couple of regular season division titles. Like, you're probably taking that. Obviously, you would have liked to Stanley Cup at the end. But, if the same prophecy came now and it was, hey, I know you guys want Devon Levi, but if you wait X amount of time, when you get him, you're going to get years of exceptional goaltending. You're going to get years of great success. I think most fans would take it. And obviously, we can't confirm any of that. We can't say none of that is a lock. Um, but I will stand on my ground of look up players that were first round picks. I know Devon wasn't, but if not first round picks, highly touted players that were expected to dominate in the NHL, got called up at 18, 19, 20 years old, weren't ready, and were not put in a position to properly develop. And look how their careers changed. The Sabres are doing everything they can to make sure Devon Levi has the most successful NHL career he can.
You went a bit into what the expanded goalie sort of pipeline might look like this season, and I think a lot of people are they might wonder about Tobias Lehtonen and Scott Ratzlaff. Should everybody in the organization be healthy? Should Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen be their goaltender on opening night? And obviously Alex Lyon will probably be his backup, and that means Alex Georgiev probably gets sent to Rochester. How do you think they're going to navigate that? What do you think the exact setup is going to be? How are they going to factor in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ratzlaff or Leinenen end up in Jacksonville. I for the sake of playing games, I think it's interesting that you could have one of them with Devon Levi, and you have a really young tandem in goal. But the staff have kind of preached that if that happens, that's okay, because Devon Levi has enough service time under his belt now that even though he's only 23, he gets it. And it's possible that Devon can help these other young goaltenders who are in a similar position. Now, it is interesting because I've thought that myself. Like, let's just say it's Leinenen and Levi for happenstance. I don't know, just like Devon's probably still playing the majority of the games, right? But like Leinenen has to play. So like, what does that look like? Does he get 20 games? Does he get 25? Does he get 30? That's too close to 50% in the AHL. Do they believe Devon Levi? Like, do they want to make it a 1A, 1B? I don't know. And to your point, then there's the injury questions, and Georgiev is certainly a piece there. Do the Sabres want to carry 3 goaltenders, or do they want Rochester to carry 3 goaltenders? And then if that happens, then I don't know, do Leinenen and Ratzlaff both end up in Jacksonville?
That's what I was wondering, because that would be pretty. I guess that's like when they signed Georgiev. When you look at the full depth chart, I guess I kind of figured that's what they would do. Just have the two new ELCs. Run a Swayman Allmark sort of tandem in Jacksonville. So yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. I think it would put a lot of eyes on Jacksonville. But obviously that's we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, and the Sabres are not shy to do that. Like I mentioned earlier, the top of our conversation, I was in Cincinnati. Like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was in Cincinnati before.
That's where he started, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of young goaltenders that have made their way through the ECHL. And, I worked in that league for a couple of years, so maybe I have a bias, but I truly do believe that AA hockey, at minimum in the goaltending position, is a great place to develop young goaltenders. And the ECHL has proven to be an excellent training ground for that. So one of them at minimum, I think, is there, but it's possible it's 2. It's certainly, again, it goes back to it being a good problem to have. But you're definitely scratching your head at times thinking, man, how are they going to juggle this?
So we've talked a lot about sort of the main guys, the main pieces, the main situations. What is there one player or maybe one storyline or maybe a group of players? I don't know. Could it be the 2 Russian defensemen? What's one thing do you think that's flying under the radar with the Amerks heading into next season?
I think there's a lot. To be honest with you, Jonah. I'll pick part of what you said there with the Russian defenseman. Vsevolod Komarov, at the time we're talking, has not been removed from the Sabres training camp roster. He's vying for a spot.
Mm-hmm.
He is a terrific defenseman. He's tough. He's rangy. He's got a little bit of offense that I think he'd like to show more of, and he certainly was able to do that in the Quebec Major League. He was a Defenseman of the Year winner there. He was a playoff MVP there. He is talented, and I think he will be an NHL defenseman one day. Does he make that jump this year? I don't know, but if he doesn't, and he is in Rochester, I expect to see him put up more numbers offensively. Riley Fiedler-Schultz is an incredible story in terms of Rochester. This guy was undrafted. He was in the ECHL. signed a deal in the Amerks organization. He was a healthy scratch 14 consecutive games to start last season, and then finally put in. And at one point was playing on the team's top line and signed an NHL contract this offseason with the Sabres. 26 points, 13 goals in a role that had him juggling up and down the lineup. And as I mentioned at the start of the year, out of the lineup. I don't think he's going to find that problem again. He's also very young. He's in his early 20s as well. So even though he was undrafted, he's at that age where you could consider him a prospect. And if he takes a step forward, that's going to be one heck of an awesome sign to see. So, for me, I think those are the under the radar. And you know what? Actually, let's not forget. We talked all about prospects. There's still a guy by the name of Anton Wahlberg who
he was the other one I was thinking. He came into the organization and people were impressed right away when he made his debut in those playoffs. And last season I think there was a lot of ups and downs, and I think it's been the same thing throughout training camp where you've had some good moments and had some moments where maybe you're asking for more. So what does he look like heading into next season?
Yeah, I mean, and with Brett Murray out of the organization now, like Anton Wahlberg is your big body that you can put in front of the net. If he can get going and you can establish that net front presence, he's going to be a threat on the power play. I think he has the ability to make some plays as well. So he'll be somebody, another one that kind of fell off the radar because he was hurt and we haven't seen him play in over half a year is Victor Neuchev. And he falls in the category like Rosen of being in a contract year. Same thing with Nikita Novikov on the blue line. Like contract years, we see it in the NHL. It doesn't get talked about a lot in the American League because so often players are on year-to-year deals. But all these guys coming off of these ELCs, like this is a massive year for them. And it goes back to the internal competition as well. So I know I'm giving you that workaround answer again, right? I don't want that one player to isolate, but it's because the Sabres have such a deep prospect pipeline. There could be a lot of because look, we've spent so much time talking about Helenius, Ostlund, Rosen, Levi, that we have not talked about Novikov, Komarov, Neuchev, Wahlberg, Josh Dunn still being up with the Sabres right now. Riley Fiedler-Schultz getting the NHL contract. Zach Metzel on the NHL contract. There's probably more players flying under the radar than there should be right now.
Yeah, heck, even Ryan Johnson, who I think was someone that a lot of people thought, after spending the whole year in Rochester last year, I think has come and surprised a lot of people, and it looks like he's going to make the Sabres out of camp.
Yeah, even him, right? That name, evaded my mind somehow. There's so many talented players. Jack Rathbone was called up last year and he didn't get to play a game. But that guy's been an all-star in the AHL before. I mean, there's such a possibility. It's really, really exciting times if you're a Rochester Americans fan.
Yeah, there's just so many guys that you can look at on a night-to-night basis and just have so much fun projecting and seeing where that development goes. The one big thing about next season that I'm going to let you do most of the talking because you're the only one that could probably you're the best one that could do this justice, is this season for the Amerks is going to be a celebration of Don Stevens, who is celebrating his 40th year with the Amerks, 58 in broadcasting overall. He's the longest tenured broadcaster in AHL history, 3,300 games called with the Amerks, just an incredible and illustrious career. Like I said, you can do it better justice than I think anybody could. Go deep into detail about what Don means to the organization and the city of Rochester and just how this season is going to be such a celebration of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to put into words sometimes. Even just thinking about it, when that announcement went live and to peel back the curtain a little bit, the video, which is a very emotional piece, two things to know about it. Don did all of that himself in terms of the script. Don did it on, I guess now 3 things. That's one thing. The second thing is Don did it all in one take. That if you watch the video, it's over 8 minutes. We splice in B-roll and whatnot. But it's shot all in one take from Don. There's no stutter stepping. There's no, can we do it again? It's raw, it's real, it's emotional. He's crying during the video. There were 4 or 5 of us in the room. We were all welling up. Um, and I just and the last part to mention on the behind the scenes aspect is we filmed it about a month before it went out. So we have so many projects to get done that we talked with Don, and it was like, hey, this means a lot to us. We know it means a lot to you. Um, we kind of need to get this in the chamber though, with everything else that's going on. And then we filmed it and then we sat and like nothing happened for a few weeks, right? We edited it. We had it done. It was finished being edited with about 2.5, 3 weeks out before it got revealed. And so then you kind of was like, okay, all right, you're waiting, you're waiting, you're waiting. And then that day came and it went out and it exploded on social media. The amount of people reaching out to Don, it's just incredible. Like the American Hockey League has existed for 90 years. 90 years. Nobody has been there longer than Don Stevens. Nobody has called more AHL games than Don Stevens. I joke, I'm 30, and I always use this joke. 58 years in broadcasting. Don Stevens' broadcasting career is older than my parents. Like, it is incredible. And to see what, like, the evolution, if you appreciate the art of broadcasting, and I'm sure you do, we're here right now, like, think of how broadcasting was so different 58 years ago, and even just 40 years to when Don arrived in 1986 in Rochester, New York. Like, we couldn't do then what we're able to do right now. Technology and how far it's come along. Just the shift in some cases, better or worse, I think radio broadcasting, and seeing how that's kind of changed. Television broadcasting, streaming, podcasts, like this guy has, when Don was in the AHL to start, there was like 12 teams in the league. I think it's 12. I may be all wrong about that. There's 32 teams in the AHL now. Like when Don came in the league in 1986, if you look at the standings then and you look now, including Rochester, there are 3 cities left in this league that have an AHL team that did back then. Rochester, Springfield, although Springfield, Massachusetts, they've gone through a few name and ownership changes, and then of course the Hershey Bears. And Don has left such an indelible mark on the city of Rochester. I think there's a lot of great and talented broadcasters in this city, and I personally think that there will never be another Don Stevens in Rochester, New York, in the American Hockey League. I don't think anybody will ever have a career as long as he has had in this league. And this is a league where there's a joke for the people that are in the league in all these different leagues. Like when I was in the ECHL was the ever-changing hockey league because things always were going on. In the NHL, it's the never hungry league because you're able to just you're on these planes, you're getting fed these. You're not eating Biscoff cookies on a charter flight from one NHL city to the next, and then there's a media meal that's this buffet style in so many cases. The AHL is the always hungry league, where you're going in, you're hoping you can find a bite to eat. You're grinding on the coach buses. You're doing these overnight trips. You're unloading at the arena as sometimes 3, 4 in the morning. Like Don lived through all of that. And the AHL travel today is a godsend compared to what Don used to do. Like Don told me stories before of the Amerks and the Hershey Bears who were about 5 hours away on a bus doing home and homes, where like the Amerks and Hershey would pull out of Rochester at 11 p.m. on Saturday, drive 4 or 5 hours to Hershey, get there Sunday at 3 in the morning and have to play at 3 p.m. just to get back on the bus for the Amerks and go back to Rochester. Like, to quantify the amount of miles that guy has lived on a bus is insane. So much of his career speaks to his perseverance and ability to survive through a league like this for as long as he has. But that speaks to the love he has for this. Like Don is emotional because of how much he loves this in so many ways. Don gave his life to the Rochester Americans, his life to the career of broadcasting, to the art of broadcasting, and what those eyes have seen over the decades and the literal half century plus career that he has had. It just it's incredible. And I know Sabres fans can relate with Rick Jeanneret, and how powerful and moving that was a couple of years ago with RJ's last call. I said to Don that regardless of how the Amerks perform on the ice, Don Stevens' final season as the voice of the Rochester Americans will be one of the key storylines, if not the number one storyline for the Rochester Americans 25-26 season, for their 70th season. I think when we reflect on this, I hope it's a Calder Cup. I hope it's a 30-year drought being broken from when they won it in 96. But it will also be remembered, and it will be talked about in 5 years. It will be talked about in 10 years, and so on, that this was the last year of the most iconic voice that will ever voice Rochester Americans hockey. And I feel like I could talk forever and ever more about this. I have to watch out that I do not get emotional just talking about it, because, for the last 2 years that I was here, Don has been incredibly helpful to me in my career. And he's been, there's times where he gives me a kick in the rear end, and it's warranted and it's needed. There's times where Don and I have had friendly banter that's like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, crap, did I make him mad at me? Like, and then he'll make me think that I did make him mad, and then he'll joke with me. Like, he's the ultimate king of jokes in the broadcast booth. But like, he reminds me this so many times where, he'll say like everything he does is to help. Is to help me, and everything he does when it comes to the lessons he's given me is to help me grow. And everything he's done in his career and these last 40 years is to put the Rochester Americans in the best position he could possibly do. So, yeah, it's going to be a really special year in Rochester, and I hope everybody has a chance, even in Buffalo, to tune in, even if for a little bit, whether it's on the radio or Flow Hockey, or eventually I'm sure we'll announce a local television broadcast schedule. He's an icon, man. I'll end it at that. Don Stevens is an icon.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess you shared a few tidbits there, but I wanted to know, is there a single story that you think truly like can encapsulate just who he was in just a short little blurb?
Oh man.
Or is it just everything? And I'm sure the answer is yes. Where like, is it just everything about him that just makes him the man and the mentor and the legend that he is?
I don't know. Because there's so many things. Because it's like, it is on the spot. Like Don, because it's done in so many different ways. Like, so much like what I love about Don most is his humor. Like, to me, that's what sticks out. And he's just, I mean, some of them are jokes that are just like, Don, you can't be saying that. But like, but it's like the stupid stuff, to be honest. Like, I feel like everybody, when you run into someone, you're like, hey man, how you doing? Or, hey, how you feeling? And he'll go, oh, with my hands. And you're like, all right, what's up, Don? Clouds, taxes, it's like, just, it's the silly stuff. There will be times in the game, we had at one point we had Nikita Novikov and Vsevolod Komarov on the ice at the same time. And I think he was like, Novikov to Komarov to back here to one of the, oh, wait a minute. He's like one of the Kovs, like, just doesn't care. Like, he just sells out at that point, and he's just whatever, right? There'll be some of these goaltenders that have 4 syllables in their last name, and he's like, I'm not even doing it today. And like, it's just so like him. Like, the first time I met Don, and actually here's a story that, like, I don't know if this really speaks to the guy he is, but it's just funny to me. Like, I'll always remember it. I first met Don in 2018. I was an intern for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. It was my senior year in college. And what I did when I worked for the Phantoms as a radio broadcast intern was I walked into every press box I possibly could whenever the away team was there. Introduced myself. Hi, I'm Andrew Mossbrooks. I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be you when I grow up. What do I need to do? What was your path? Because you learn the subjectivity of it all and all the different avenues that you can go down. And I remember meeting Don, and I would do a little bit of research going into meeting all of these people. And I was like, oh man, okay, like this guy's like a big deal, because at that point he was only doing it for 35 or 34 or 33 years, whatever, right? And so I'm like, hey, Mr. Stevens, and go reach out, shake his hand, and just looked a little scruffled, beard, and he's setting up and he's paying attention to all his equipment. I'm probably being a little bit of a pest here, but I'm like all shy, and I'm like, so I've been doing this, and I really want to be in broadcasting, and like you've had this legendary career. Um, uh, what advice would you give to like a college student to get into broadcasting? And he said, I would tell you not to get into broadcasting. And he's like, another one that I may botch his quote here, because it is a quote now. He says, uh, the pay at the top of the industry is immoral, and the pay everywhere else is impractical. And he said all these things. And then I got hired 5 years later to work for the Rochester Americans. And I remember saying to him when I sat upstairs, first time I was in the booth with him before a game, I said, I don't know if you remember this, but I need to apologize to you before we get on air. And he's like, oh, what do you apologize? What do you mean? And I said, 5 years ago, you told me not to get into broadcasting. Clearly, I did not take your advice. And there we are, 5 years later, sitting in a booth together. And now we're 7 years later, before my I guess professional broadcasting career got started. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like I know that doesn't, in some ways it doesn't sound like an endorsement of Don, but if anybody knows Don Stevens, it is such an endorsement of the guy. Like he is a one of one. There's just not somebody that's going to be cut from the same cloth that Don Stevens was.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to see how this season is just one big celebration of him. And like I said, it's just he is a legend, and everything you just said just reflects that. So before we close things down, I guess the only thing left to really talk about is just how we see this season playing out. Jason Carmano said it himself. He thinks the goal to win the Calder Cup is a realistic one. How do you see this season playing out for the Amerks?
I think so we're obviously giving this prediction based on everything as it currently is. Things can change. I think the Amerks are a playoff team without question. And when I look around the North Division, it's going to be competitive again. I think the three teams that finish at the top are going to finish at the top again. I don't want to give a prediction as to where the Amerks will finish specifically, point total, win total. But I think the top three is going to be some combination of Rochester, Laval, and Syracuse. My bold North Division prediction is I think the Cleveland Monsters may be the worst team in the division after being 2 years removed from being a goal away from the Calder Cup final. I think the Amerks are going to, I said I'm not going to do a win prediction. I think, what was it, 45 wins last year?
I believe it was 45-22. Do you see them surpassing their point total? How about that? They had 92 points last year. They inched ever so closer to the 99 points they had in 2019.
I'm going to say, man, I'm going to make I'll give you the prediction. I will say they will finish with 90 points. But that could still win the division because 2 years ago, I think 88 won it. My reasoning is because I think the goaltending and defense will be outstanding. I do think the offense will be good. I do not know if it will be as good. I hope it will. It may be better, but the subtractions we're talking about, at least up front, Mason Jobst, Brett Murray, Lukas Rusek, that is well over 100 points gone from your lineup. And I think you are asking a lot of players to take a big step forward, which I think is very possible. Will it happen across the board? I don't know. There's a thing called a sophomore slump. I hope it doesn't happen. But I do think there are a lot of question marks there, and when I look offensively alone, I do sit there and say, okay, if you're asking the questions, what are the questions? The questions are, can Isak Rosen do it again? Can Isak Rosen be that point per game player in the AHL? Can Konsta Helenius and Noah Ostlund build off of incredible rookie seasons, specifically in the second half for both of them? Can they be consistent all year long? Can they be healthy? Can Anton Wahlberg step up and show what he showed with Team Sweden at World Juniors? Can Victor Neuchev rebound from season-ending shoulder surgery and put together a really good campaign in a contract year? Are the new forwards that are in here, the Carson Myers and Tanner Lecisions of the world, are they going to replace the points that those other veterans, the Mason Jobsts and Brett Murrays of the world, did? I think this team is going to be very close to last season. It could give or take a couple of points, but I could see those offensive question marks potentially resulting in a team that's going to rely a little bit more on defense and goaltending this year. But I think overall, they're still a very, very good team. And I do think Jason Karmanos is accurate in a forecast, a realistic forecast, that with this group, and by the way, here's the other thing. If some of these guys go to the NHL this year and they play games, as long as they hit that handful of games they need in the AHL, they can come right back down for the playoffs. So if the Amerks get in the postseason, regardless of where they finish, if all those guys are healthy and here, this team has the potential to hoist that cup up in June.
Yeah, and they've always shown a willingness to do that. I mean, all those years ago, like Peyton Krebs and Matthias Samuelsson were reinforcements in the playoffs. Last year, I didn't think they were going to send Yuri Kulik back. They ended up doing so. Same with Tyson Kozak. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, if Helenius or Ostlund or anybody has prolonged time spent with the Sabres, if, it might be a safe bet to say they'll find themselves in the playoffs with the Amerks. And it'll also be interesting to see if if Radim Murtka, if the Seattle Thunderbirds are maybe done early, like he could join them, and that would be a ton of fun as well, because I think right now, we didn't really talk about him because he's up with the Sabres. It kind of looks like he'll go back to the WHL, but I don't think it's about questioning whether or not he could play in the AHL. I think a lot of it's opportunity. So, that would be a fun reinforcement to get in the first or second round as well.
Absolutely. This team is loaded. And mentioning, forgetting to mention guys like Matteo Costantini, Red Savage, people that could end up serving very meaningful depth roles for this organization when the time comes, because especially when you're talking playoffs, man, we've seen it. It's not always the McDavids and the Crosbys of the world that are getting the job done. Sometimes it's the guys I think Penguins always, because I just remember Max Talbot getting 2 goals in Game 7 against the Detroit Red Wings. Who would have thought that guy would be the reason the Pittsburgh Penguins won a Stanley Cup that season? You never know who's going to contribute, but there's a lot of talent up and down this, not just the Amerks roster, the organization as a whole.
Well, Andrew, it's been an absolute blast talking to you, man. You're a great conversation, a great amount of insight into the Amerks. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah. Happy to be here, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again sometime.
So for anybody listening, is there anything you want to point them to, maybe to find more of your work, social media, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Sure. I think the Amerks.com is the best way to find all the stuff. Obviously following us at Amerks Hockey on X and various other platforms. And don't forget, October 10th, 7:05, Rochester Americans opening their season up against the Toronto Marlies. That is going to be very exciting. We have so many great promotions as well. We've talked as much about Don and these players, but it is the 70th season of Rochester Americans hockey. So we have so many exciting nights planned throughout the 25-26 year at Blue Cross Arena in downtown Rochester. Tickets are affordable, and they're available now at Amerks.com. And I'll do the soft plug and just say at Mossbrooks48 on X if you want to see me talking about the team.
He's Andrew Mossbrooks. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.